Hey everyone. Okay, thanks so much for joining us today. We have had a huge response to this webinar, so we're really excited to present it. I know it's very exciting for Kenneth as well, who's going to talk a little bit about how this bill came to be, and we will be taking lots of questions. So make sure that you can identify the Q&A window or the chat window on Zoom so that you know how to ask your question. We've kept all the lines muted, so you won't be able to talk, but we can definitely see the chat window and the Q&A window. We're also going to be doing some live polling whenever we're going through the presentation, so be aware of that, and just get your questions ready. So with that, I think I'll kick it off over to Kenneth Besserman, our General Counsel.
Well, thank you, Anna. My name is Kenneth Besserman. I'm the General Counsel for the Texas Restaurant Association. One of my roles here at TRA is helping out on our advocacy efforts. As the Texas Restaurant Association is your advocate at the state capitol and in the city government as well as in Washington, but our primary focus is always at the state capitol. And the legislative session just ended in May of 2019, and we are getting ready to implement and enforce a lot of legislation that will begin on September 1st. Just as a brief reminder to all our members and non-members that are on the call and soon-to-be members, we have a dedicated staff here at TRA that lobbies and advocates on behalf of the industry at the Capitol. And anytime you need any information about legislation that passed, that did not pass, you have any great ideas about what you want to see in the future, please reach out to us and let us know what you're feeling so we can get a better feel of what's going on in the industry and can make every effort to advocate on your behalf. This past session, which just ended, was a very successful legislative session for the Texas Restaurant Association. Among the bills that passed, obviously why we're here today is alcohol delivery, but just briefly, a couple other bills that did pass, and happy to talk about these more offline if you need more information. We passed a bill on Oyster Aquaculture to create an oyster aquaculture industry in Texas. We fixed some legislation from last session on scales relating to those of you that sell food by weight. No longer have to have your scales registered and certified by the Department of Agriculture. And we also fixed a little quirk in the law relating to those of you that are in the process or getting alcohol permits or licenses. We fix a quirk in the law that will speed up that process moving forward. So why are we here today? Alcohol delivery. Alcohol was one of the big issues on the legislative agenda this session, along with many other things like school finance, property tax reform, and other issues. But alcohol was important because the Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission was under sunset review in 2018 and 2019. What sunset review is, it's a process by which all state agencies come before the Sunset Commission, which are elected officials, and their statute and agency are reviewed for effectiveness, for efficiencies, and agency operations. So every agency goes through that about once every 12 years, and this was TABC's turn to go through sunset. Now, sunset is not intended to make any policy decisions, although sometimes policy inadvertently or advertently gets rolled into the sunset process. But because TABC and alcohol were at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, a lot of alcohol issues got addressed this session. Just briefly, the sunset legislation focused on restructuring the agency, changing and eliminating duplicative permits and licenses, eliminating the beer and ale distinction in the code, and improving a lot of the alcohol marketing practices that are out there. And so that legislation, House Bill 1545, is effective September 1st, but it will take a period of months, if not years, to implement all of the changes that were passed in that legislation. So alcohol delivery. There's been a little bit of confusion and probably misunderstanding on alcohol delivery. You may have seen many of the articles that are out there. The press always did not get it correct. There are a number of different types of alcohol delivery bills that are out there, and so there's a little bit of confusion. The most important bill, at least from our perspective, was SB 1450, Senate Bill 1450, which we'll talk about more in depth briefly, but that's the alcohol delivery from restaurants in conjunction with the delivery of food. There was also a beer-to-go bill, which was placed in the Sunset Bill, which would allow consumers to take beer away from breweries directly without having to purchase that elsewhere. And there's also the beer and wine retailers now have some expanded ability to deliver beer, ale, and wine directly to consumers. So while the delivery issues are similar, there's different ways, because of the way the permits and the licenses are set up, that they had to be addressed differently in the statute. So Senate Bill 1450, which is the bill that will allow, generally, this bill will allow mixed beverage permittees to deliver to consumers for off-premises consumption. So this is the bill that will allow mixed beverage permittees to have alcohol leave the premises. As a general rule, and as you all know, mixed beverages or drinks cannot leave the establishment of a mixed beverage permittee. This is the exception to that will allow it to go with delivery of food. This bill starts on September 1st, so in a couple of days, so get ready. There are a lot of important qualifications and requirements in order to take part in alcohol delivery, so please be mindful of these, and you have to meet every one of them in order to deliver alcohol. It's not just opening up the doors and alcohol flowing out of the establishment. Probably the most important thing, and it may also be the most unknown aspect of this legislation, is that a mixed beverage permittee must have a food and beverage certificate in order for alcohol to leave the premises. It is understood, and we know that a lot of mixed beverage permittees do not have a food and beverage certificate. Some do because of past alcohol elections that have wetted up, either fully wetted up or partially wetted up a county. But there are a lot of places in the state where food and beverage certificates are not commonly required or not used. So in order to partake in this legislation, you need a food and beverage certificate.
Just to pause you there real quick, Kenneth, too. We have a poll going on right now on the webinar to find out if you guys do have a current food and beverage certificate. If you have any questions related to that, be sure to ask them in the chat window or in the Q&A panel.
Okay. So, starting September 1st, and I think even right now, you can apply for your food and beverage certificate. Those certificates, I believe, are $576 per certificate, and those are 2-year certificates. So you need a food and beverage certificate to deliver alcohol under this legislation. Another requirement of the legislation is that it must accompany food delivered and prepared on the premises. So it's just not a Wild West where alcohol is just leaving a mixed beverage permittee willy-nilly. It has to accompany food that is prepared on the premises.
Hey, Kenneth, we're getting some questions on how to apply for the food and beverage certificate. Where do people go to apply for that? And can we give them some examples of restaurants who might already have an F&B certificate?
So an example of ones are, in a lot of places, in the past 20 years or so, there have been over 400 local option elections in various parts of the state that were previously dry. There have been elections either in the full county or parts of a county to wet up or to allow alcohol in that county. Many times, if not all the time, those elections were drawn such that alcohol would be allowed in at restaurants. Food, mixed beverage in restaurants. That was what was on the ballot measure. And under the code, in order to qualify as a restaurant, you have to have a food and beverage certificate, which means with some changes that happened 2 years ago, your alcohol sales cannot exceed 60% of your total sales of anything, total sales on the premises. So in essence, you're serving food, you're serving prepared food, you're not a typical bar, you're more on the restaurant side of things, so there is some food preparation and food, food eaten on the premises or taken away from the premises. But there is a restaurant operation that is at least 40% of total sales.
But for example, if they don't know if they have an F&B certificate, is there a way they can go and check?
I believe the license that you get from TABC should state on the license MB, mixed beverage with F&B. And if you don't have that, you likely do not have a food and beverage certificate, and you need to go to the TABC website or to your regional TABC office and go and apply for the certificate. I think it's it's not as sophisticated as your original mixed beverage application, but they do ask some certain questions about sales and your food preparation so that they can determine that you qualify.
So what we'll do, guys, everyone on the webinar, once we send out the recording for this, we'll include a link for y'all to go take a look at where on the TABC website you can both verify if you already have F&B or how to apply for it, which I think will help a lot. But based on what you're saying, Kenneth, it sounds like restaurants that exist perhaps in areas that might have been dry before, like I'm from the Hill Country in Wimberley, and there are a lot of those restaurants out there probably already have F&B without knowing, right?
If the restaurant is in an area that has been dry since 72 or 73 when alcohol was allowed or mixed drinks were allowed, they probably do not have an F&B. For example, many restaurants in Austin do not have an F&B. Now, they may have it for insurance purposes because a lot of insurance companies require F&B, as do leases. Landlords may require an F&B just to make sure it's more of a restaurant than a typical bar. But there's no legal requirement in the law that they have an F&B. So that's just something you need to check on your license and get with TABC. If you do not have an F&B, you need to apply for that, and you can apply for that today. But on September 1st, if you do not have an F&B, you cannot deliver alcohol.
All right.
The next requirement on this legislation is that if you deliver or a third party delivers, the delivery cannot be made to an area that is not wet or does not allow for alcohol. So that's something you need to be aware of. If you're doing your own delivery, you need to check to make sure that you're delivering in a legally wet area of the state. TABC and is working on some applications or some ways in which restaurants and third-party delivery entities will be able to find out if areas are wet or dry. It may not be easy as you think, but they're trying to pull information together from past elections and maps and boundaries to make sure there is something that's readily available for those that will be delivering alcohol.
And where is that going to be available?
I have to check with TABC, but I believe TABC is developing a program or an app or a database which will be publicly accessible so that delivery personnel, whether it's your own or third party, will be able to use that and rely upon that. Once that's put out, they will be able to rely upon that. So if there is something on the ground that is different than what they are publishing, that will likely be a defense. Some other things you need to be aware of when delivering alcohol and using this legislation. The alcohol must be purchased through your normal distributor channels. There's no going down to the local package store and buying a bunch of alcohol and bringing it back and then selling it. You've got to bring it through the 3-tier system just like you do normally selling your product in the store.
One question that we have on here from Gina was, will they pass a bill that helps sell margaritas in the future, mainly ordered by our industry? Can you deliver and sell mixed beverages with this bill?
I was about to get to that, but the short answer is no. A restaurant cannot mix their own drinks, put it in a cup, a Go cup, or their own type cup, and put a lid on it, or seal it themselves and sell it to go. It has to be sealed by the manufacturer, which there's no precise definition in the statute, but it's meant to mean sort of your normal cans of beer, your normal bottles of beer, and bottles of wine that are sealed by the manufacturer in their manufacturing process. So, you know, cans that are sealed and bottles that have tops on it or corks in it, or they're on the market now are these pre-made mixed drinks that typically come in a can that are sealed by the manufacturer. So no putting, you know, the plastic lid on the cup and sealing it, or no sealing by the retailer. It has to be done by the manufacturer. And those are precise definitions in the code, what a manufacturer is and what a retailer is. And typically a restaurant is a retailer, not a manufacturer.
So does this mean that restaurants with F&B and MB will be able to deliver fully sealed bottles of liquor?
Bottles of wine, yes. Bottles of beer and cans of beer, and bottles of distilled spirits or pre-made distilled spirits up to 375 milliliters.
How big is
that? Is I think it's just under half a pint, but
okay.
Don't quote me on that, but that's typically a little bit smaller.
Like half a bottle of wine, basically?
Yeah, half a bottle of wine.
Thanks, Kyle, for recommending that.
So
we have some fans of White Claw, by the way, on the webinar. They've asked if that would work. I mean, White Claw is obviously sealed. It's hard seltzer.
Yes. No, I've not had White Claw.
Well, we will fix that later. But, okay, so that would qualify as something that they could deliver.
Yes.
Great.
So, you know, I think we did, so product has to be sealed by the manufacturer, not by the restaurant. The product cannot exceed, the mixed drinks or the distilled spirits cannot exceed 375 milliliters. And delivery must be acknowledged by the recipient by signing a receipt for the delivery of the product. Now, it can be a paper receipt. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of apps and electronic receipts out there and software that will, you know, be developed for alcohol delivery, but the person receiving it has to acknowledge receipt of the product.
So hold on, we'll get back to that in a second. I have some more questions related to the 375 milliliter requirement. Are these per person or per order?
So as of today, all we have to go on is what is in the statute. TABC has not issued any guidance or rules on amount or per person or anything related to that. TABC, I believe, is working on some guidance that may be issued in the coming weeks or months and some rules along the same time frame, but nothing has been issued yet. So all we have to go on right now is the letter of the law, which does not put any specific limits or prohibitions on the amount. So there is none. It just says alcohol delivered in conjunction with the delivery of prepared food. Where this will come up, just like it comes up in your typical restaurant setting, is overservice, serving minors, and serving in areas that are dry or not where alcohol is not permitted. So if you're taking, you know, a case of beer to a house for one person, you know, along with their orders of dinner, and it's the third time you are taking that product over there that day, that may raise a red flag. So just be mindful of that. So what just like over-serving in your typical restaurant or bar setting, those are things that you will have to be aware of. But as of right now, there's no guidance or no rules on whether it's a daily limit or a personal limit.
And there's no, one beverage per food item, no case of beer per food item, none of that is written right now.
It just says in conjunction with the preparation of prepared food. There has been some talk about whether it's per entree or per party or per person or a daily limit, but nothing concrete has come out, and we don't know when that guidance will come out. I will say that the Texas Restaurant Association, along with a number of other interested parties and associations, have been involved and will continue to be involved in the TABC stakeholder process. They have been very open and transparent with their process, and they're inviting everybody to come and provide comments. So we will be part of that process moving forward. They will hold regular meetings and, issue some guidance and ask for our input. So if you've got any specific recommendations about what you want or what you don't want or concerns, please let us know so that we have a better idea what our members want or don't want, or what the issues are that are out there.
There's a really good question here, Kenneth, I've been wondering about too, around the food requirement. Is it analogous to the Sunday AM type rules where can the food be chips and salsa? Not prepared really, unless the salsa could be prepared. So what do you think?
I don't want to get into the Sunday brunch issue because I know that's been problematic in the past, but let me just quote the statute directly. It says, an alcoholic beverage from the permitted premises may be delivered to the ultimate consumer located off-premise in an area where the sale of beverage is legal if the delivery of the alcoholic beverage is made as part of the delivery of food prepared at the permitted premises. That's it.
Well,
so
okay, that's pretty loose.
We'll leave it at that right now. Typically, we're talking about prepared, so we're probably talking about entrees, fajita dinner, hamburgers, not a bag of chips and a case of beer. But not, so prepared.
So one could say that a lot of the great Mexican restaurants we have in Texas prepare their own salsa, right? That is something that is prepared there. Okay, I'm getting that lawyer smile, guys. So it is, we'll probably get more direction from TABC as we go forward, but someone else here had a question about cheese and meat boards. That's not something that you could consider prepared unless they were actually doing their own charcuterie and aging of cheese, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a big gray area.
It is a gray area. I know I'll have to go back and check. I believe there's some rules some mention of issues of prepared food in TABC rules relating to food and beverage certificates and relating to the Sunday brunch law. But let me talk with TABC a little bit more, see if they have some guidance or suggestions or are preparing some guidance on this particular issue, and we'll get back with you. But use your judgment right now what you think prepared food is, and be prepared to defend it. I'll give you the lawyerly answer to that.
Okay.
So just briefly going through, some of the other requirements and do's and don'ts. Like I said before, there's no to-go alcohol, so a consumer can't order it themselves to pick up. They can't order their pizza and their bottle of wine and come and pick it up themselves. This law is specifically related to delivery of alcohol either by the restaurant themselves or by a third party. So no to-go orders. Cannot be delivered to another mixed beverage premises. So if you can't be sitting in one bar and order a a hamburger and some alcohol from the restaurant across the street to be delivered. It has to be off premise, so not from one premise to another premise. We already mentioned manufacturer sealed drinks. There's no definition of that, but it has to be sealed by the manufacturer, and we sort of all know who the manufacturers are: the distillers, the wineries, the breweries, the bigger players, not the restaurants. I mean, there are plenty of mixed beverage permittees and other permittees that have the ability to can or to bottle their own product. Unless they have a manufacturing license, that will not be allowed. Like I said, delivery may be done by the mixed beverage permittee themselves or a third party. An important note is drivers have to be...
Hold on, I just want to make sure, because there's been a lot of questions around third party. So when we say third party, we mean the guys like Favor and Grubhub and Uber Eats, Waiter, those companies, right?
Yes. So the statute specifically allows for a consumer delivery permit. This is a permit that an entity, presumably a third-party delivery company like the Ubers and the Grubhubs, et cetera, could apply for a consumer delivery permit that would allow them to deliver alcohol. That consumer delivery permit, will start on September 1st. I do not believe TBC has issued any yet, and they're in the process of developing that right now. So I think as of September 1st, I think only mixed beverage permittees with a food and beverage certificate will be allowed to deliver, because those consumer delivery permits, the CD permits, have not been issued yet, I believe. Those permits will be $5,000 for I believe they're a 2-year permit, and those permits will cover entire state operation for the third party. Or if you are a mixed beverage permittee yourself, you can also obtain a consumer delivery permit if you need it either for insurance purposes, or you may have a separate entity that only does delivery and a separate entity that holds a mixed beverage permit. You may want to have a consumer delivery permit, maybe for liability or insurance purposes.
So the consumer delivery permit, does that handle some of the dram shop liability?
Yes.
Oh.
So where this comes in is that if a mixed beverage permittee uses a third party to deliver the food and alcohol, and they have a consumer delivery permit, liability will shift to the consumer delivery permittee upon transfer of the food and alcohol to them.
Okay.
So that all serving requirements and delivery requirements and over-serving and underage issues will be transferred to the consumer delivery permittee. As of September 1st, all that liability is going to rest with the mixed beverage permittee, because they are the ones that are delivering and have the ability to deliver as of September 1st.
Okay.
So, depending on your...
Just hold on. That was a lot of lawyer speak. Let's break down a little bit. But the consumer delivery permit is not required if they self-delivering, right? They just need mixed beverage and food and beverage.
Mixed beverage, food and beverage, prepared food, everything else we talked about earlier on. You do not need a consumer delivery permit to deliver.
This is an interesting question. Eduardo wants to know if those permits need to be posted in a building somewhere. And second question, can the restaurant pay for the permit on behalf of the third-party company?
I'm not exactly sure what, if you're talking about the consumer, if you are a restaurant that will be receiving or obtaining a consumer delivery permit, I don't know of any specific posting requirements, but I assume you would post it in the same place that you currently post your mixed beverage permit. So,
yeah,
on the wall, so for the inspectors to see.
If you want to pay for the third-party delivery company, I'm sure they would accept that, but why would you?
Why? I mean, because I don't know where Eduardo is located, but, especially if you're in one of the big cities, there are at least half a dozen, probably dozens of entities that do third-party delivery or will be doing third-party delivery, and unless you are just using one, I don't see an advantage of paying for that, and I don't think they, I don't think that's a good idea.
Are they not taking enough of your money, Eduardo? Sorry to all of our friends from third-party delivery that are on the call right now. So we've had a bunch of questions related to two different areas, Kenneth, that I want to kind of throw at you before we get into ID verification, which I know there's a bunch of questions on that too. And that's around food truck. Do the same rules apply to food trucks as restaurants?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, if they have the requirements of mixed beverage permit and a food and beverage certificate. I don't know how many food trucks have mixed beverage permits. I know, there is an issue which we need to address with TABC, but there's an issue of a lot of the food truck parks where there is a common mixed beverage permit that may encompass the whole park, but because of the premises issue, where locations are. So if you're just your normal food truck, you likely don't have a mixed beverage permit. You may have a wine and beer permit, but you probably do not have a mixed beverage permit. But I don't know the full answer to that.
So the follow-up then is around catering.
So just like some of the other questions I've had, we'll refer back to the statute, but there's nothing in the statute that addresses catering directly. I can tell you personally, this did come up in some backroom discussions of this. This bill was not intended to cover the catering operation, because catering has its own rules under TABC. So there is a whole slate of rules on catering and catering operations, specifically related to alcohol. It's not intended to be used to supplant the catering rules. Now, there may be some issues about office parties or, impromptu things, office lunches. We have to get a little bit more guidance from TABC on that. But if it's for, pre-planned weddings and other events, my best advice is not to use this because there is a whole catering program and regime that TABC has that we've worked very closely with them and to make it a little more manageable for the restaurant industry. So there's a lot better rules out there than have been out there in the past, and so I would advise you to use those catering rules. But if you've got specific questions on catering, please let me know, and we will get some clarification from TABC on that.
Okay.
So Anna mentioned about IDs and verifications. I mean, the issue about IDs and over-serving, nothing really has changed in the law relating to that, except that we are now in a little bit of a new environment where those IDs and where that check happens. Rather than at the restaurant itself, now this is taking place off premises at somebody's house or at an office setting. So if you are the delivering company or a third party is a delivering company, they will have to verify age. There will be training that will be required, just like seller-server training now, in order to take advantage of safe harbor. So your drivers, who will have to be 21, no underage, nobody under 21 driving. Your insurance companies will also have a say about that as well. But those verifications and those age checks will happen off-site, and you will need to check IDs and have them sign it, on paper or in an app. You know, just like, you know, I mentioned before, we are in close contact with the TABC on all these issues. They are, hopefully we'll be issuing some guidance soon. Maybe if you've got some questions that you have, please let us know so that we can make that available for them and they can answer those questions or put it in some guidance. Any other questions, Anna?
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay. Hold on. We have to get to this because it's so cute. I just want you guys to see it. Okay. I've gotten a few questions on what happens if their food sales are less than 60%, and if they're eligible to deliver. It sounds like if they're less than 60%, they wouldn't qualify for the F&B certificate, right?
No, so long as their alcohol sales are not over 60%. Food sales can be, I mean, so you can have 55 alcohol sale, 45 food sale.
Okay.
So nothing has changed in this legislation regarding food and beverage certificates. TABC still has the ability to enforce food and beverage certificates and to make sure that you are in compliance with those. They do regular audits and inspections of mixed beverage permittees to determine that they fall within the rules. So the TRA was very successful last session in 2017 in passing legislation to adjust those percentages because there has been a change in the market. Alcohol sales are increasing. There's now a wide variety of product out there. You know, while food sales and food costs have remained relatively stable, alcohol sales or alcohol sales price has increased. So you may not be selling more product, but it's the sales price is taking a greater percentage of your revenue. So we were able to adjust those percentage. In addition, that legislation expanded the definition of premises so that the premises is not just the physical bar or restaurant. It will encompass, you know, if you've got right next door, if you've got a gift shop, which may not be in the permitted premise, but it's attached to the restaurant, or your whole parking lot, if you take in revenue on parking or other things. So it has increased the definition of what total sales are so that you are not in this position where it is very close to the line. You have a lot more wiggle room or a lot to make the limits. But nothing has changed in this legislation nothing in this legislation has changed the law on F&B certificates and the percentage requirements.
Okay, Joseph and Tom, I hope that helps answer your question. Denise, can you sell bottles of beer through the drive-through? No. Did drive-through come up?
Drive-through has come up. It's come up in some recent conversation. I don't think it came up during the legislative process, but it has to be delivered off premises. So
So no.
It will depend on, well, the short answer is probably no because you're not delivering it, although there have been some that have made the argument that by handing it to them, you're delivering it to them. I think the intention is to deliver it off the premise, physically take it somewhere else besides your parking lot. So I think the answer is going to be no. I will wait for some further guidance from TABC on that, but no, handing them a bottle of wine out the drive-through was not what was intended by the bill, but we need more guidance.
This is a great question, and something that's definitely going to come up now as we're approaching football season. Robert just asked for tailgates, right? Would delivery to a stadium location parking lot be okay, even knowing that there's probably a permitted bar on premise, just not in that parking lot?
Well, the legislation says it has to be delivered to a place that is not permitted. Tailgating may raise issues, I guess, if it's UT or other colleges. If it's state parking lots or private parking lots, there may be restrictions there. Cities may have their own local ordinances about public consumption. So they, I guess they do allow tailgating to some extent. I don't know if it, it may be limited to, personal, brought on by the tailgater themselves. That's a good question. We will.
Yeah, that is a really good question. Yeah. I know that we've had some friends from TBC join us on the webinar. I'm sure they're writing furiously all of these questions down so that they can help expand some guidelines for this. When do you think, Kenneth, we can expect additional guidelines and guidance from TBC? I
don't know. I'm hearing, weeks or a month or so, but that's the best I know at this point. We are in contact with them, and they know this is important to a lot of different people, and they're hopefully going to put something together soon.
So let's talk a little bit about IDs. There's been a lot of questions around who's responsible for IDing. So let's kind of walk through it. We know that the person who's doing the delivery has to be 21.
Yes.
Right? But they don't necessarily have to have a TBC certification, like an alcohol service certification.
Well, so if the restaurant wants to take advantage of safe harbor, they need to train their delivery drivers also, just like they train their bar staff or their servers. TABC is working to develop a alcohol training program.
Yes, for delivery.
For delivery specific, yes, for delivery specific, and that's coming soon or in development or in discussions at the moment.
Right, and we're very happy to be working with our friends at TBC on that. So yes. We'll make sure that, it'll probably look very similar to what the training already is on TBC to go and products like that, correct?
Correct.
About overservice and how to recognize IDs. So then on the ID checking itself, how does TBC recommend IDs get checked? I saw in there some use of a electronic verification system, like an app.
Well, those are alternatives. So just like your typical bar restaurant setting, it is asking for IDs. I would imagine that if somebody, going forward, as these third-party delivery companies get into this business and are allowing alcohol to be ordered in conjunction with a meal, ultimately to be delivered, they may put some blocks or some questions in their ordering system. If there are any third-party delivery companies on the call, I would encourage that, so that those questions are at least asked. We've all seen where we go to a brewery or a distillery site, it says, "Are you 21?" Obviously you can just click through it, but so that should be a first step. And then, they may want to ask for the age on the ordering system, but ultimately, whoever is delivering is going to have to check those IDs again, because, it's easy to bypass those things on a website. So they will have to check IDs just like you check IDs at the table in a restaurant.
So then what happens if either restaurant or third party is delivering food and alcohol, and the person at the door, the consumer, doesn't have a valid ID with them? What happens to that product itself, the alcohol product?
Well, if it is a consumer delivery company, all the liability is on them right now, since they have taken delivery of the product and the meal. If the person is not of age or there's some question about it, the product should not be delivered. Now, there's nothing in the legislation that talks about return of product, and I think that may be something both that we need to discuss with TABC, but that it may also be a private contractual agreement between the third parties and the restaurants. We may want to consider, coming up with a best practice or a process by which product can be delivered back.
Okay.
That's, the long answer is there's nothing in statute about what happens to that because.
Sure, okay. So this is a question I had from the very beginning. Donna, I'm glad you brought it up because back in the day when I was at college at Texas State, we had a lovely margarita drive-through where they handed us the margarita in the cup and there was a lid on top and there was a straw. I never went there, but I heard about it. So could you tell us a little bit about
that's a little bit different and a quirk in the law, and there's actually, I just stumbled across this yesterday on the TABC website. There is a sort of a FAQ or a description of this type scenario, and it all has to do with the type of permit you have and the type of margarita, whether it is wine-based or beer-based versus distilled. And
Kyle is correcting me and reminding me that it was wine-based, not liquor-based.
so that's the distinction. So it's wine-based, and they have a wine and beer permit. I know these. Well, I won't get into that, but it depends on the type of permit they have. If it's a mixed beverage permit, typically, and that product is not leaving in a go cup with a straw, with a piece of paper on top of it.
Yes. I think that people would appreciate if we walk through the liability shift one more time.
Sure.
From third parties or anyone else who has the consumer delivery permit.
Yes, let me find the exact language in the statute here.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second. So, section 5707 of the Texas Alcohol Beverage Code. I'll read it directly and then we can ask some questions. A retailer's responsibilities under this code regarding delivery of an alcoholic beverage to the ultimate consumer are considered satisfied, meaning they end, at the time the retailer transfers possession of an alcoholic beverage to the consumer delivery permittee or a delivery driver employed by the permittee. So once you give the alcohol to the delivery company or the driver, your responsibilities end. If you're in the typical situation where you are going to be using a third party to deliver the alcohol. So your liability ends right there. You are no longer responsible for checking IDs, checking, over-serving, delivery to a dry area, possibly a dry area. Those issues now shift to the consumer delivery permittee. If you are delivering yourself, those issues remain under your control, so that they are your responsibilities to handle and make sure nothing is being violated.
Okay. I think that spells it out, Ann. I hope that answered your question. There's sort of a dual question here between Colin and Gina. Colin says, in reference to section 106.05, possession of alcohol by a minor, it states that a minor 18 to 20 may possess alcohol in the scope of their employment, right? If we employ our own drivers, does the 21-year-old requirement still apply under these circumstances?
I would say yes. I mean, this is a more specific law than the law about 18 to 20-year-olds working in a mixed beverage establishment. So this is much more limited. So, the specific prohibition or the specific language should apply to the extent it can. And, this, was very well thought out by by TABC and all the stakeholders during the process, because we also didn't want the issue of open container, so drivers taking product in their car, maybe it gets open somewhere along the line. So 21 to deliver. Now, the 18 and 20-year-olds can still work in the establishment, but to actually deliver, they've got to be 21.
Okay. And then Gina asked sort of a follow-up to that, are restaurants then required to ID the driver each time before delivery? Because even though the liability is handed off, right, should they still, if they have a question about the driver's age, I mean, technically they wouldn't be liable anymore, but like.
Well, I think the answer is no, because the statute requires that a consumer delivery permit holder, so your Uber Eats or your DoorDashes, it is a requirement that they can only employ somebody that's 21 or older for delivery of alcohol.
Got it.
So, you know, the requirement is on them on the front end, so you do not have to ID drivers coming in and picking up, because any problems, you know, get shifted to them once you hand it over to them.
Okay, so what about, Nicole has a good question, what about places, and you see this specifically with third-party delivery companies offering specials and coupons on total bill, like 10% off codes and stuff. Since Texas is not allowed to use rebates and coupons for alcohol, they should basically have it set up in their system where that 10% would never apply.
Yeah, they need to do that. I don't know how knowledgeable the delivery companies are about the coupon and rebate issue in Texas, and it's been a law for quite a long time in Texas about rebates and coupons and discounts, so they're going to need to become educated about how they do that. You're correct, so they need to stop that. I had another thing, but go ahead and ask her the next question. It'll come back to me.
So Eddie's asked this question a few different ways. I'm sorry, it's taken a while to get to it, Eddie. A restaurant could not deliver food and beer, wine to a hotel, like a hotel room, that has a bar inside of it, right? And what if that bar is closed?
It will depend on what their premises are for purposes of the hotel's license. I know hotels are very unique in the way they design their bars and their setup, so the actual physical line of where their permit is may just be the bar area or the bar in the lobby. Room, you know, a person can take drinks back to their room, but there are some hotels that permit the whole premises, so that would be a no.
But then how would a delivery company know?
That they wouldn't know. So, that if you're using a delivery company, they could be on the hook for delivering to a permitted premises. I think we probably need to get some guidance from TABC on that.
Sure.
It's going to depend on how they define premises under this bill, if it includes the whole hotel or just the bar versus the bar and restaurant, or where, because.
And what when we say they're going to be on the hook, do we know what that hook is yet? Is it a fine? If any of these rules are broken.
Well, it's just like what's under current law, which is typically where this comes up is somebody gets injured or unfortunately passes away because of an alcohol-related incident, and there's a lawsuit.
Right.
And okay, the restaurant or the third-party delivery company is serving minors or serving somebody that's obviously intoxicated,
right.
And that's where your safe harbor comes in, assuming you've taken the proper courses, you have a policy that talks about over-service, you're not. I mean, there are defenses in it, but that's where it comes in. I believe there are also some fines and penalties that TABC can issue for violating those provisions. They also in the past have done stings, or they do. I forgot the term, but during different holiday seasons, whether it's spring break or July 4th, they may do programs where they have increased vigilance on alcohol-related issues, and so they may be coming to restaurants or hotels, or they may start looking at some of the third-party operators about what they're doing in particular times of the year. So there can be some civil penalties as well, but most often it comes up in the course of a lawsuit about serving minors and over-serving.
Okay, I have a good one for you, because Gina, our friend Gina from State Auto, is asking a really, really good question. So she said, we were talking a little bit back and forth on the chat window about, do restaurants know when someone is coming in to pick up for third-party delivery service? And the answer is no. They don't always know because they don't have to identify themselves. They're not mandated to wear a uniform or anything like that, right? So then in that case, how does the restaurant know if it's takeout or delivery? So the restaurant could say, like, are you delivering this, or are you taking it out, like, to go? Because I know specifically, like, Favor, the way they operate, they actually, the Favor delivery drivers actually place the order themselves, and it could sound like a takeout order versus delivery, because they don't identify themselves. I mean, they're not told not to identify themselves, but I just don't think it's a mandate. We can follow up with them and find out. But I think that's a really good point.
That is a good point, that the delivery companies are probably going to have to identify themselves either, by what they're wearing,
right,
or, some sort of app or ID saying I'm the delivery driver. Here's my identification,
sure.
And I guess we need to have a conversation with the delivery companies. That's actually a very good point.
Yeah, because I mean, as a consumer, I could just call up and say I'm delivering for Favor, and then just do a takeout. I'm not going to do that, Kenneth, don't worry. But
don't give other people those ideas.
Yeah, no, I won't. You're right. Okay, sorry. Just some, as we're getting down to the end of the hour, we only have about 3 minutes left. I want to hit like some of the big points on this, because we've got a lot of questions on this. This is always for delivery. This is not for to-go orders. This is typically not for drive-through orders. Right?
Correct.
Okay. And remind us the kind of permits that a restaurant needs to have in order to make this happen.
They need a mixed beverage permit with a food and beverage certificate.
And should they display those permits?
They should display those where they typically display their alcohol permits, usually up at the front of the restaurant, so inspectors can see. I've seen them kind of on sideboards, but they are pretty apparent. And if you're an operator, you know where your permit is hung, and you should put the F&B certificate with it. If it's separate, sometimes you may have an MB with FB already, and it will say that on the certificate.
And then, what does the third-party delivery company need to have in order to do this?
Third-party delivery company will need a consumer delivery permit, which they will obtain. I mean, I think they can apply for it now, but it will, take time to approve those permits, and they will start delivering relatively soon.
And they can do that through TABC?
TABC I don't know if they have developed the actual permit application yet. Last week or 2 weeks ago, they set the consumer delivery permit fee, which is $5,000. The application, I'm not sure yet, but we can check on that.
And then another point on the size of alcohol beverages that can be delivered. They can do full-size bottles of wine, but liquor can only be the 375.
Correct. Okay. And bottles and cans of beer.
Or White Claw.
White Claw. In the statute, there is no limit on the amount of alcohol, and we are, waiting for some guidance from TABC on that. Just use your best judgment when it comes to delivering and serving alcohol. So, probably not 3 cases of beer with your order of fries. That's probably over the line.
Whatever. You're probably right. And then Colin brings up a good point about updates or changes or future guidance on advertising alcohol delivery. There's advertising restrictions currently in place that might need adjustment. So how do we recommend restaurants advertise that they're now able to deliver?
You're correct. TABC is going through some marketing practice rules, updates, and possible changes. I've had some stakeholder meetings, and they're trying to align the beer and wine marketing practices with other marketing practices. Those alignments have been recommended and put in statute under the sunset legislation that passed. But as of right now, I think it would be okay to advertise or mention that alcohol can be delivered. I mean, on your website, or I guess that's typically where it's going to happen, is on your website. I mean, that's not anything. I do not believe that that is something that would be a violative of current marketing practice rules.
Okay. Well, this has been really informative. There are a ton of more questions. I think we covered most of the different subjects. If we didn't get your question answered, I really recommend you email Kenneth. His email address is right there. His cell phone number, oh wait, no, that's his office number. If you need a cell phone number, I'm sure he'd give it to you, is right there as well. He's available to any of our members if they want to ask a question about this. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done still with TABC, so thank you to our TABC friends for joining us on this webinar as well. I'm sure Kenneth will be following up shortly. I will be sending out this recorded webinar to everyone who attended. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.